Okay, let's start. Hello, everyone. I'm Christian. I am an engineering manager in Outreach. I've been a manager for more than 5 years, like 1.5 years in Outreach. I am Italian, and yes, I disapprove the pineapple on the pizza. So, now that we clear this out, we can go to my presentation. What I'm going to talk about is some tips and tricks that I use as a manager and information that I would have liked to know when I got promoted in this role. So anybody is recently being promoted as a manager role? Okay.
Recently.
Fairly recently, you never know. So anybody wants to be a manager here? Okay, cool. So this presentation will not be very useful for you. I will try anyway to entertain you. So let's say that you've just been promoted as a manager. So what do you do first? Let's start with your team. So whether you inherit a team or you need to create a team from scratch, the first thing that you should put attention on is the interviews, like creating your team, So let's start with that. When you do an interview, usually I follow some specific steps, and let's look at them. So first of all is the introduction. The introduction is meant to have some sort of relationship with the candidate that you are interviewing, and the other hidden agenda part of the interview is that you are selling the company, right? Like you want the person that is talking with you to be engaged and to be, hyped about what they are about to join potentially. The second step is the foundational one, right? Like this makes sense, like you talk about the foundation, like what's their experience, like a high-level overview of their experience. And then you're going towards more the skill set where you do a technical deep dive and things like that. And then there is the part that I like to call the hard questions. But the hard questions, we will explore it in the next slide. And finally, there is the space. So let's look at some examples. Like, why do you want to do a deep dive while you do an interview? Because it can happen that some candidates have an incredible resume where they worked on so many projects and things like that. What you want to know is if they are actually aware of their work done. Like it happened that I was interviewing a candidate, they had such major experience, very interesting. But then in the end, when I went more into deep dive, I found out that this candidate didn't really know what they did because they were mostly like taking notes in meetings. So you want to be careful about that. And on the part of their space, I want to emphasize there because usually, especially if you are new at this job, you tend to think that the interview is something that you need to find out about this candidate, whatever you can in the short amount of time that you have. And you forget that you need to leave the space to the candidate as well because they also need to know where are they going to work potentially. So never forget about their space. But the interesting part to me is the hard questions. Like the hard questions is some questions where you try to probe about what's the candidate's motivation and what is their deeper interests and how they will perform as a team member. So some example of hard questions that I do. Like one is what's quality to you? What's make the code and project scalable? And of course, here, it's too wide of a question to be explained that fast, right? And this is on purpose. Like, you want to know if the candidate is very superficial about the response. Like, quality to me is if the code is readable. Yeah, thank you, but you also want to know what does it mean, how the code is readable. Like, is it going to talk about the complexity of the function? Is it going to talk about if you should have deep or shallow functions and things like that? So that I really feel it's really important. The other one is what's your biggest mistake? And this is awesome. I really use it a lot. And this is to identify people with a God complex. Like it's really common that you find a person that is really skilled and it would actually be technically really, really powerful. But then you ask, what's your biggest mistake? And they're like, oh, I never make mistakes. You know? And by that, it's a red flag, no hire, easy peasy. Like you can just, because you would know that when they join your team, they will have this God complex and they will treat everybody like idiots because they are the biggest genius ever. And I had some of them. I learned about this. Then the other part is, what achievement are you most proud of? Like, what do you want to find out about this question? You want to find out if the person takes pride in what they do, if they just do work mechanically because, I'm a software engineer, I earn so much money and it's cool like that. Or if they are actually proud of what they're doing, if they really care and they really have some projects that they're like, this is my baby and I'm proud of it, So these are 3 hard questions. But when you go into the hard questions, my pro tip number 1, as I was saying, is be generic, because you want to probe into the interpretation of your question by the potential candidate. And the second one is that you need to be explicit about the hard question. Like, usually what I do in interview is this one. I talk and, we get comfortable, we get technical deep dive and such, and then I'm like, look, I'm going to ask you the hard questions part. And I'm very transparent about the fact that they will have time to respond, because you don't want to make them feel on the spot. And at the same time, I wouldn't be able to just answer a question like this, just like that, So you want them to take the time to think and to actually give you an answer that is meaningful. So don't fall into the trap of doing like a military interrogation during interviews. So that's when you're interviewing. But what happens after the interview? So first of all, my suggestion is you need to acknowledge your bias. Everybody is biased, and you need to realize that, because it can happen sometimes that you interview some person that really looks like your best friend. And I really talk from experience. Like, there was a guy that was exactly my best friend, and this is a problem, because it could bias you into saying, you know what, this is the right candidate. And it doesn't matter whatever they said, whatever their experience. So acknowledge it and don't be fooled by it. And how you don't get fooled by it? By taking a lot of notes and by having a standardized process when you interview. Like, you need to have a similar set of questions, you need to have a lot of notes, and then you need to review it like sort of in a vacuum. The second pro tip is to use this performance trust matrix. So how it works is very simple. Like, you consider the performance as like the technical, the hard skills that the person has from what you gather during the interview process. And the trust is like their character. How much I would trust this person to be in my team and to delegate him the work or whatever. Like, how much do I trust this person? And what you really, really want to avoid is the high-performing low trust. Basically, it's those people that are technically very, very skilled, but they have the God complex. Like, it's very common, and you really want to avoid this. I would much rather prefer somebody that has a low technical skill but high trust. And I hired some of these. Like, there was a guy that was just coming out from university, and he was very transparent. And he told me, like, look, I honestly, I don't know much. I don't know what's backend and frontend. I think I would like it, but I swear I will really put my effort into it. And I gave him a shot, and he became the most performing person in the team. So, like, be mindful about this, and you can also use the same matrix while you have the people in your team, and it could be good also for you to get an evaluation inside your team. The third pro tip is tricky. Like, usually when you get the position open from HR and they're like, yes, now you can hire the new guy. When this happens, it's because it has been months that you're complaining that you don't have enough capacity and you're under fire and under hell. So they open the position, and your first idea is that I need to hire as fast as possible, no matter what. This will push you to hire people like low trust, high performance, and that will completely destroy your team. So my suggestion there, don't be fooled by it. it's not really that as priority as you think. Just take your time, and no hire is much better than a wrong hire. It could really destroy your team. Moving on, one-to-ones. So one-to-ones, I believe, are the most important thing that should be in your calendar as a manager. Like the one-to-one is where you give space to your people to talk about what matters to them. So one-to-ones are mostly useful to create a culture of feedback. Like, as I was saying, I'm from Italy. And there is a strange culture of feedback there. Like, basically, you tend to get taken into a feedback session with your manager where something is wrong. So it's like, I set a calendar with you, Christian. And you're like, oh my God, what did I do? You know? And creating this culture is bad. So with the one-to-one, you need to really be careful to balance out the positive and the constructive feedbacks. And in this way, the person you are leading is much more comfortable into discussing whatever is wrong, whatever is good, whatever can help, and it helps their motivation, and it helps them to know that you're really paying attention to this person. So use it to create a culture of feedback. And related to the feedback, you need to be sure that people are empowered to give you feedback as manager. You know, like it is often like new managers tend to say, oh, you did this good, this bad, this good, this bad. And then one-to-one is finished, but where is the space for these people to tell you, but look, but this decision that you took, I don't believe is the correct one, or things like that. So be sure that in the one-to-one there is space for them to be open and say, look, I don't believe that this decision is the correct one, and can you give me more context, or things like that. And it's important because you need to trust your team that they have a different point of view of the objectives, and you might make mistakes as a manager. It's not that you're God, right? And the third one, when you give negative feedback, it is tempting, especially as a new manager, to just give vague negative feedback. It's like, I can feel that this guy is not performing really well. But you don't have really much time to know what exactly is wrong. So you're like, I don't think you're performing up to standard. But then they would ask you, but what exactly did I do? And you don't know. And this creates high frustration. So don't do that. If you give a negative feedback, just be as precise as you can and use them wisely. Like, you cannot just throw, you're not performing well, and then go away, see you, bye, and it's a big issue. While you are managing people, you also want to really put effort into the distinction that there is between more junior employees and senior employees. Like, you cannot have one mentoring fits all, right? Like, when you have a junior employee, what do you want to focus on? Like, they need to develop their skills, they need to develop their hard skills, and maybe they just came out of university or whatever. And so you need to be as explicit as possible. And you need to encourage questions. Like, it's typical for more junior people to not ask questions because in themselves they are thinking, oh my God, if I ask this, I will look like an idiot, like really. But you need to encourage these questions because you want them to grow and you want them to learn. And you also need to put some shorter term goals. Like, it's not that you have a new guy and you're like, look, now do this huge goal of 3 years and see you when you finish. Like, you need to guide them better. But when you have a senior employee, then you know that these people really know their stuff, really know how they are working, really know how to complete their projects. So it is your role as a manager to give them more of a sense on how the wider organization is working from your higher point of view. Like, you need to guide them towards the organizational politics, like more complex stuff, and especially, very important, senior employee, you need to push them to mentor more junior employees because senior employees could really get stuck into being focused on some vertical part of the code that they really know and they write the coolest algorithm ever. But in the end, at some point, they will get bored of it. So be mindful about this. So, pro tip number 1, junior employees, you need to teach them a way how they could work to be proficient. So it's up to you to teach them how to work. While more senior employees, you don't touch how they work. Like, it's not that if in your mind it's best if they work in some certain way, then it is good, because these people usually have 10, 15 years of experience and they know what works for them. Don't touch it, like, don't. Low performers, that is an interesting thing. So at some point it will happen that you will need to deal with low performers, and usually when you are like a new manager, like you see a low performer and you're like, oh, this person is horrible, I will fire him. You know, that is wrong. That is wrong. And another issue when you're a new manager is that you don't address it. It's like somebody starts to perform bad and you don't address it because maybe they will get better later. They will not. They will not. So like what you should do is address it immediately, talk with them, and especially work with them to make it better. Like, you need to understand that most of the time there is this rule that I forgot the name, but I would look smarter if I knew the name, but 85% of the case the issue is systemic. So maybe there is some issue in the company that is impacting the person and they cannot be as productive as possible. So maybe you have a person that really is into, I don't know, front-end development, and they fall for some reorganization into back-end and they're not good at it. But this is not really their fault, you know? So you need to be mindful about this and you need to address it in this way first. Also, when you talk with a low performer, you need to be careful to be optimistic about this. Like, not always you will believe that they will be able to, but be optimistic about that because people surprise you. And the last pro tip that is one of the tips that I use the most is to pair them with somebody else. This is, although it's a double-edged sword, because if you take a highly demotivated person and you pair him with somebody that is motivated, you might risk to demotivate two people. So you need to be mindful about this, but usually pairing low performers with high performers, it helps, and usually you get a good return. So that is my tip for low performers. Also, you should know where are you leading from. Like, when I started my journey as a manager, I didn't think about where am I leading from. I'm just the manager and I'm doing the stuff. So there are mostly two ways that you can take your leadership. Like, one is leading from the front. Leading from the front is like the most common way that a manager works. You know, like, you get into the manager, you think about what should I do? I should lead the team, right? And it's like King Leonidas with the Spartans, you know, like, I'm leading, let's go Spartans, let's go. But you need to be careful about this. Like, leading from the front means that you take the challenges head first, and it is on a philosophy like, if I wouldn't do this, I cannot ask my team to do it for me. And it's a great tool to increase the team trust in you, to increase the team morale, because the team was like, my God, my manager is like serious guy, you know. But you need to be careful because this could lead you to micromanagement, and it could lead you to take so many tasks on you that then you're not scalable. And when your projects become so wide, then it's too much. If you lead from the front everything, then you will be overwhelmed, and that's a big issue to be mindful for. So, what can you do instead? You can lead from behind. Leading from behind requires finesse. You know, it's a hard thing to do, but basically what you do is that you step out of the way of the team and you empower the team to make the decisions. So basically, it's not your responsibility anymore. It is ultimately your responsibility for the company, but inside the team, it's the responsibility of each team member to lead their project. And you just course correct. And that is a great way to scale, but it is also hard to master, because if you are not careful and if there is high danger for the team, high danger could mean there is this project that has high visibility and the CEO is looking on it. You cannot put on the spot your guy and just, you do it. It's your problem now, go, you know. But this is where real growth occurs, because it is common for new managers especially to be like, I will be the shit shield, you know? Like, I will shield the team for any harm that comes in the company. And a lot of managers really take pride in this, but this is wrong, because people will not be exposed to this and will not grow from it. So what you want to achieve ultimately is that your people grow and your people know how to behave in the company and how to be productive in the company. And eventually they will need to grow to a point that maybe they will become managers, maybe they will become super senior employees, doesn't matter. But if you shield them all the time, they will never grow. So be careful about this. And especially this leading from the front and leading from the back is not a definitive thing that you just choose. Like, you know, I'm leading from the back and everything is good. Like, you need to know, based on the context, if you're supposed to do one or the other. Like, my recommendation is just, like, lead from behind where things are safer, lead from the front where there is high danger. More or less, it works and helps people grow in a safe environment. And be really mindful of what you're doing, because if you're really not mindful about where are you leading from, you will arrive to the point that you're leading from the middle. So leading from the middle, you can imagine it like in a battle and you're in the middle of the chaos and then you're like, let's go there, but nobody cares, you know, like, so, like, be mindful about this. So now we discussed about all the people, things, and things like that. So what does a manager do? Takes decisions. So a bit of tips and tricks to take decisions. So one thing that you should avoid, like, it can happen, but just don't do it, is when somebody comes to you and is like, boss, we need to choose. We need to do either this or that. And I have a great experience. I had a boss that would work like that. Like, I would come to him and he's like, we need to decide either this or that. And he would start like doing this. And he would think about it. It was pretending to think about it, to be honest. And then he would be like, let's try both. But this doesn't work. It just frustrates people. You are the manager. You're supposed to take the decision and make it, like, and be accountable for it. So don't do a bit of both. They will hate you for this. Then, pro tip number 2, you need to evaluate the decision. Like, if you see that it's something easy to unmake, take it as fast as possible and get it out of the way. If you see that it can make serious harm to unmake it, take as much time as it is given to you. Like, really take it, like, no harm in this. The third part is listen to the team. Like, so many times you see this, and especially when you go even in higher levels, you know, like when you start to talk with vice president, super mega vice president of the universe, you know, like, these people tend to completely ignore what their team is telling to them, because they start to get this sense of, you know, like, I know best. Maybe, but listen to your team and maybe you get valuable insights before taking your decision. And especially pro tip number 4, like, rely on patterns. Like, most of the thing that you need to decide, it's somebody else did it before you. Like, maybe there are some patterns, maybe use them, maybe it will work, you know, like, usually my idea is like, when I'm taking a decision, is like, is there like a book in some library that is thinking it is better to, I don't know, abandon this cool design pattern to use this Excel spreadsheet? Maybe no, so I shouldn't do it, you know. So rely on patterns. But what if you're like, cool, nice tips, but I really want to fail as a manager. I really like to see the world burn. So I have great tips for you. So to fail as a manager, tips number 1, micromanage. So your team doesn't really know what they are doing, because you are the biggest brain in the team. So check every detail, like, check everything, don't trust them. This is awesome and it will totally not backfire. The second part is don't delegate. Like, you became a manager, right? So you are the best. So, like, you are the most experienced. If there is a task, if you do it, it takes 2 minutes. If you ask the guy to do it, it will take 2 days. You do it, it will not backfire, totally. The third part is to avoid difficult conversation. Like, you see two team members that start to fight over a project and they start to say bad words to each other. Don't address it. They are adults. They will figure it out, you know. Somebody start to low performing and start to participate in the stand-ups from the bed. Just don't say anything. It will be sorted out. So these are great tips to fail as a manager. Don't do them, please. Don't. And lastly is your productivity. Like when you become a manager, often you forget that the way that you were working as an engineer or whatever doesn't really work when you work as a manager, because you're exposed to much more context, you're exposed to much more tasks and much more things. So I got this that works for me, is the GTD, get things done, and we would need another meetup to explain this, but basically follow this pattern. It would work. Like you start to get any information, you put it into a queue, and you spend 15 minutes in a day to sort it out between things that you will do today, things that you will do different days, things that are just reference for projects, and things that you will say someday, but actually you will never read again. And especially delegate. Like you have a lot of tasks, just delegate. Like you don't need to do everything. Like there is the team for you. So where to go from here? So I can recommend this book, Engineering Management for the rest of us. It's a really interesting book, especially for people starting as an engineering manager. I suggest the Pragmatic Engineer blog to stay up to date. You know, like you don't really have that much time to find the stuff on your own. And of course, the best thing that you can read in your life, like the Outreach Engineering blog, is the best. Like you should go and put like 50 claps per post. Like we will be very happy about this. So my thing is that my final pro tip is that as a manager, you really need to care. Like you need to realize that your role is that leading people that put their trust in you, and they put the trust in you to bring the team to success, but it's especially important that you will help them succeed in their goals. And their goals, it's important. Like I made a mistake when I was a younger manager. I had this developer, he was a senior developer, and I was like, this guy is so good, he will make an awesome manager. And I just decided, and I made him as a manager, and it completely broke him. So like be sure that you know their goals and you really care about them achieving their goals. Like be careful and care about your people, and yeah, that's it. Thank you.